the Lord has chosen Jacob for himself, Israel as his own possession. For I know that the Lord is great, and that our God is above all gods. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does, in heaven and on earth, in the seas and all the deeps. He it is who made the clouds rise at the end of the earth, who makes lightnings for the rain, and brings forth wind from its storehouses. He it was who struck down the firstborn of Egypt, both man and beast, who in our midst, O Egypt, sent signs and wonders against Pharaoh and his servants, who struck down any nations and killed many kings, Sihon the king of the Amorites, Og the king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan, and gave their land as a heritage to his people Israel. Your name, O God, endures forever, your renown, O Lord, throughout all ages. For the Lord will vindicate his people and will have compassion on his servants. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths but do not speak. They have eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear, nor is there any breath in their mouths. Those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. O house of Israel, bless the Lord. O house of Aaron, bless the Lord. O house of Levi, bless the Lord. You who fear the Lord, bless the Lord. Blessed be the Lord from Zion, who dwells in Jerusalem. Praise the Lord. So obviously there's a lot there, but I just want to emphasize two things that I think are really important. Thing number one, did you notice that before we get into the history of Israel, particularly the Exodus from Egypt and then the settling in the land, did you notice that the first thing that was talked about was the fact that God's the creator? So, for I know the Lord is great, that our Lord is above all gods. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does in heaven and earth and the seas. It is he who makes the clouds rise to the end of the earth, who makes lightnings for rain. That is, in effect, right, in order to understand what's unfolding in the history of Israel, you have to understand who the chief actor is. And it's God, but not just like a God, or a really important God or something like that, but the creator, capital C, from whom all life comes and to whom all life is responsible. And if you don't understand that, right, then whatever you read in the Old Testament is going to be skewed. So that comes first. The second thing that we want to notice is this. Notice that we get a summary of the Exodus from Egypt, how Israel is allowed to escape from Pharaoh and all his servants. Plagues are sent, right? And the plagues indicate actually that God is superior to all the gods of Egypt, even Pharaoh. So that's an important thing. But then this, a really important line here. It's kind of like one verse, but it's really important. And gave their land as a heritage to his people Israel. That is, the psalm helps us to understand what the book of Joshua is about. The book of Joshua isn't about how the people of Israel, who were like really, really brave and a bunch of military geniuses, conquered Palestine. That's not the story. Rather, the story actually can be summarized in one sentence. The book of Joshua can be summarized in one sentence. The Lord gave this land to the people of Israel. That's what the story is really about. So notice this. Who created the universe? God. Who created Israel? God. How did the people of Israel get out of slavery in Egypt? God. How did the people of Israel settle in the land of Canaan? God. Okay, so it's really, really important to kind of get the theological emphases correct. So let's take a look at Joshua 3 and 4. We'll take a look at 4 somewhat briefly because a number of things happened that we'll just want to take note of. So now we're going to read about Israel's crossing of the Jordan River. And the thing to recognize, right, is there's a number of kind of subtle things that are going on here that we don't want to miss. First, the entrance into the promised land isn't just, okay, guys, cross the river. Rather, And this will be really understandable to us, right? The crossing into the land actually is a kind of liturgical procession. Kind of like we see at the beginning of every service, right? That is, it isn't just, that people are going in line. Rather, they're going in a certain order. So let's see what that order is. So here it is. This is Joshua 3:1. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim, where they were camping. And they came to the Jordan, and he and all the people of Israel lodged there before they passed over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from the place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it of about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way that you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass before the people. So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went before the people. So notice what's going on here. This is a procession of the people into the land, and the first thing, the thing that's ahead of the procession, just like the cross is at the head of the procession here, right, is the Ark of the Covenant. And I just want to say a word about it, because this is like really a really, really important thing. So we've learned, right, from our adventures in Deuteronomy and also in Exodus, that one of the functions of the Ark, right, is it's this big box that contains the tablets of the law. So in effect, right, it's the Ark of the Covenant. It's the place where the visible sign of Israel's covenant with God is kept. And therefore, it kind of has a semi-sacramental sense about it. But there's also another thing about the Ark that we want to note here. And I think the best way to say this is to just look quickly at a passage from Isaiah. This is Isaiah 37, 16, where we're told this involves a conversation that Isaiah is having with King Hezekiah. But in Isaiah 37:16, we find this: O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, enthroned on the cherubim. So you may remember, right, that on the top of the ark there was this kind of gold cover, and there were cherubs on each end of it. They were facing one another with their wings outstretched. Here Isaiah tells us that God's enthroned on this, and that's really important because what it tells us is this. It tells us that the Ark of the Covenant is seen by Israel as the earthly representation of God's heavenly throne. So notice this. What do the people of Israel follow as they enter the promised land? It's not Joshua. It's not like the national flag or, whatever. It's the throne of God. So there's something really important going on here that is right. Because the throne of God is the first thing that's coming into the land, right? It's an announcement. Who is it that's in effect claiming sovereignty over this land? It's not Israel. It's God. This will be a really important thing, right? Because this is in effect the inauguration of what Jesus is going to talk about as the kingdom of God. So, really important theological piece here. The settling of the people of Israel in this land is in effect the beginning of the establishment of God's kingdom. A kingdom which, of course, will be fully realized at the end of time. But it's really, really important, right, to notice here that this throne is sort of taken in and brought in, and in effect it's a sign, okay, there are all these Canaanite kings out there who all have their own little armies and their own little walled cities and da-da-da-da-da-da, but God is claiming this land for his own. He's claiming sovereignty over it. And also notice that before this happens, The people of Israel are to consecrate themselves. And we've read about this before. Remember when they met God at Mount Sinai, they're told by Moses to consecrate themselves. That is, they're supposed to wash their clothes. And you didn't realize that washing your clothes was a form of consecration, did you? So, when you say, you can say now, I'm not doing the laundry, I'm consecrating today. But the idea here, right, is, and this is really important too, the people of Israel aren't entering the land alone. They're entering in the presence of God. And therefore, they must be consecrated. Okay, we'll learn later, and we've kind of seen this already, right? That as the priests enter the temple, right, they have to undergo a series of purifications, because you can't just waltz in to God's presence, right? There's a whole process you have to go through to be purified. So the people of Israel now consecrate themselves. They're about to enter into the land. And then Joshua has a kind of a speech here. So we want to take a look at it, because what he says is really important. This is Joshua 3:7 and following. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. As for you, command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still at the Jordan." And Joshua said to the people of Israel, so here's Joshua's speech, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God." And Joshua said, "Here is how you will know that the living God is among you. He will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, and from each tribe a man, and when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap." So here's what's happening, and we'll take a look at Joshua's speech. The priests are commanded to lift up the ark. Remember, the ark had the box had these little rings on the side of it, and they put poles, and so they could carry it around. So the priests are going to pick up the ark, and they're going to take the ark right to the very edge of the Jordan River. And when they get there, the Jordan River is going to stop flowing. So there's a dry space for the people of Israel to cross. Now, of course, we've seen this before, right? With the parting the Red Sea. And there's a really important note here, right? The Exodus from Egypt is actually only really completed by the settling in the land. That is, it's not just that, God just isn't just kind of set them free from slavery. And says, "Okay, guys, you're free from slavery. Let's see what you'll do now. Enjoy your freedom." Something like that. No. The Exodus finds its logical completion in the settlement of the land, right? You've been freed from the bondage of Pharaoh. Now you're going to settle where you're going to be under the reign of God. Really important idea. But it's really important to notice what Joshua says here about what's going to happen. That is, he tells them that the ark is going to be the sign that the living God is present among them. So this phrase, living God, is one of the Old Testament's favorite phrases we're talking about God, right? The living God as opposed to what gods? Dead ones, right? The ones that aren't real. In Isaiah 44:9, there's this kind of a theological joke. There are such things, by the way. There are theological jokes. This theological joke is Isaiah is kind of talking about idols, the idols of the pagan nations, right? And he says, isn't it interesting that you've got some wood kind of, standing around, and somebody takes some of the wood and uses it to cook dinner, And they take the rest of the wood and make a god out of it. The same wood that was used to cook dinner is now used to make some divine being. And Isaiah is basically saying, ha, 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 aren't they stupid for doing that? The idea here, right, is that the living God is just that. He's alive. As a matter of fact, he's so alive that no created force can restrain or contain him. Okay, so the really important message right here is that, the gods of all those peoples out there, the gods of all those Canaanite peoples, right, really aren't gods. They're what we would call today mascots. Right? That's essentially what they are, right? They kind of represent the aspirations of the people who made them. Right? The distinction here with Israel is Israel's God is not a mascot because he's literally uncontrollable. And he's uncontrollable not because he's arbitrary or mean or something like that. He's uncontrollable because he is alive, capital A, such that no created force can possibly control or restrain him. And so, and this is why this is important, right? The waters are, the Jordan River is parting, not because the people of Israel are so darn important, and bodies of water just part so they can pass by. No. The water is going to part when the Lord of heaven and earth comes toward the Jordan River. It's parting for him. That's why the Jordan's going to part. Because the world's true king is about to cross that river. And so, in effect, in recognition of the fact that the king's crossing the river literally stops. And in effect says, Your Majesty, please cross. So that's the entrance into the Jordan with the Ark of the Covenant. And then Joshua comes back to remind them, behold, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing before you into the Jordan. Now, then something else really important happens. This is significant. This is Joshua 3:14. So when the people set out from their tents to pass the Jordan with the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the Ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the Ark were dipped at the brink of the water. So in effect, right, it's almost like the idea, like the moment like the priest's big toes touch the verge of the water, it parts. And now the Jordan, and as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priest bearing the ark dipped into the brink of the water. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of the harvest. The waters coming down from above stood and rose up into a heap far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan. And those flowing downward to the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed opposite Jericho. Now the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over. So water parts, the ark stays in the riverbed, and the people of Israel pass in the open space that's been opened up for them. And once again, we kind of have a Red Sea moment. Now, something else happens in chapter 4 that we want to be clear about, and that is we have two sets of memorial stones that are set up. So let's take a look at those. This is Joshua 4:1. When all the nation had finished passing over, and by the way, this passing over, right, is a clear reference to Passover back in Exodus, right? When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, take 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight. And Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe, and Joshua said to them, pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign to you. So notice this, right? So stones are being removed from the riverbed, and they're going to be taken and piled up into a stack of 12. And there's a reason for doing this, and here it is. When your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? Then you will tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over the Jordan, and the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. Now, notice this, right? We've seen this language before. So remember when we got the instructions for the Passover? One part of the instructions was, right? And when your children say to you, why are we doing this? Why are we celebrating the Passover? It's the same thing every year. It's boring. This is what you're to tell them. You're to tell them that this Passover means that the Lord, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, delivered us from slavery to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And that's why you're doing it. And if you're, a parent who has a solid sense of parental authority, you'll go on to say, and you will do it, and you will enjoy doing it. But that's optional. That is, notice what's going on here. That is, the 12 stones are being set up as yet another reminder of what God has done. So that whenever you look at that pile of 12 stones and say, now, what's that for? That becomes an occasion to be reminded of the fact, once again, right, the only reason why we are here is because God made this possible. Right? It's really important to remember what God has done. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about the book of Deuteronomy, right? One of the things that God's people are inclined to is what you might call theological amnesia, right? We're inclined to sort of forget, underrate, ignore God's mercies in the past, right? You can see a wonderful sort of sign of this today, right? Because at the center of the celebration of the Eucharist, right, is the central reminder of what God's done on our behalf, right? On the night that he was with the disciples in the upper room, what did Jesus do? He took bread and broke it, and he took a cup of wine and blessed it and said, "This represents my sacrifice on the cross. Every time you do this, the sacrifice that I effected on the cross will be present to you." Don't forget, right? So remembering is a really important thing here. So we've got this pile of stones being set up, and then this. Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. So by the time the book of Joshua was written, that pile of stones was still there. But the priests bearing the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people passed over in haste. And when all the people had finished passing over, the ark of the Lord and the priests passed over before the people, and the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh passed over armed before the people of Israel, as Moses had told them. About 40,000 ready for war passed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him, just as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. So notice another thing that's going on here. This is where we'll probably need to stop. Notice that another thing that's going on here, this I think is really important to notice. Notice that in doing all these things, God has another purpose, which is really significant. God also acts in a way to exalt his servant Joshua. just like he exalted Moses. Now, really important point here, and it's kind of obvious, but sometimes obvious points need to be made. There's a difference, right, between self-exaltation and being exalted, right? There's a difference between Moses or Joshua, in effect, like, talking to the people of Israel and saying, okay, look, I'm really important because God chose me to lead you. Can't you see the 9 stars on both my shoulders? That means I'm in charge, and you're going to do what I tell you to do. And, blah, 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 blah. This is the opposite of that, right? What's going on here is God is taking first Moses and now Joshua, who don't really want this job, right? Joshua hasn't spent the whole of his young adult life, aspiring to be the leader of Israel. This wasn't his central dream throughout college. Okay, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be the leader of Israel. Rather, this is something to which Joshua has been called. There's a wonderful scene, and I think C.S. Lewis may have been thinking about this. There's a wonderful scene in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Some of you may remember, right, where this is toward the end of the book, when Aslan comes to defeat the White Witch. And remember, Peter has that fight with Morgrim, the wolf, who's in charge of the witch's secret police. And he has this sword that's been given to him, right? And he's kind of looking out on the advancing forces of the White Witch. And Aslan tells him at that moment, by the way, Peter, I've decided to make you the high king over your brother and sisters. And, Peter's kind of like, I don't know whether I'm up to this job, Aslan. And Aslan tells him, if you had told me that you were up to it, I wouldn't have chosen you. That is, the thing that's going on here, right, with Peter, and I think also with Moses and Joshua is that Moses and Joshua, and of course Peter in the book, aren't strong or authoritative figures because they have big egos. They're strong and authoritative figures because they trust God. And so one of the things that we're going to want to watch here, and I'll say more about this as time goes on. One of the things that we're going to want to watch here, right, is that I've mentioned already, right, that Joshua is actually Jesus' in effect real name. Yehoshua, shortened to Yeshua, pronounced Jesus. One of the things we're going to want to see here, right, is that when Jesus talks in the Beatitudes about blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, Joshua is the kind of person that he's going to be talking about, right? Meek, not in the sense of, oh my gosh, who am I to do anything, I can't do anything, not that. But meekness in the sense of, you know what? I'm just like a human being, but you know what? My confidence comes from the fact that God's called me to do something. He's promised to be with me as I do it, and I believe it. And that's where my confidence comes from, right? My confidence comes not from my own sense of pride or egotism or the fact that I've got 5 degrees from the University of California at Berkeley or whatever, but rather the fact that God's called me to this role. Finally, one final thing. We also have, at the end of 4, we also have a second pile of stones set up at Gilgal. So there's one in the river and one set up by Gilgal. I think the idea right here is that the one thing actually marks the point of crossing, and the other is also kind of like a reminder so that nobody forgets. But also, it's interesting to see what's said about that second pile. This is in Joshua 4:20. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, when your children ask your fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know, Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan, so that you passed over as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us to pass over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So once again, the crossing now ends with this kind of like dramatic moment of they cross, set up the 2 piles of 12 stones, and this kind of admonition from Joshua. It's an admonition to fear the Lord your God. Now, this is kind of one of these words that we run into kind of different translation problems. One of the unfortunate things about being, translated in the Bible is that in some ways, both Greek and Hebrew, the original language of the Old Testament, the original language of the New Testament, are in some ways like more expressive languages than English. That is, if you get like a Hebrew lexicon, you'll find like one word, it'll have 19 different meanings. They're kind of like, just kind of piece your way through it. But the idea here is that the fear of the Lord, right? It might be helpful to say just a word about that. The fear of the Lord is something different than, you wake up at 3 a.m. because you've heard some noise in some part of your house. Or, you look in your rearview mirror and all you see is the grill of a giant semi. Okay. That's one kind of fear. This fear is slightly different. This is a fear that I guess, we might, as a synonym, substitute awe or reverence, right? Israel's fundamental posture toward God needs to be a posture of awe and reverence. We're going to see that's a huge struggle, but that's what Joshua is letting them know needs to be their posture as they now cross into the land. So what we're going to do next Sunday is we'll take a look at Hope 5 and 6, and we'll see, we want to pay attention to the first thing that happens once they cross into the land, because that's significant too. Obviously, they could have done a whole number of things, but what they actually do sends a really important message for what's to come.